Hello and welcome. Very good afternoon to all of you. Thanks for joining us here on Mirror Now. I am Afrida Rahman Ali. We begin by getting you the updates first on the new announcements made to regulate social media and OTT platforms. Let's talk about these new announcements that were just made by two union ministers, Prakash Javadekar and Ravi Shankar Prasad. This is a big move that the government has laid guidelines now to regulate social media and OTT platforms, emphasizing a need for the robust grievance redressal system. The government said that the social media platforms will have to set up a complaint officer in the country. The government also added that OTT platforms also require to regulate further. So the important guidelines here in terms of social media talks about robust grievance redressal system, how these grievances will have to be addressed within 24 hours and resolved within 15 days. In terms of these issues of grievance redressal, IT Minister Ravi Shankar Prasad said that a robust system is now going to be put in place. As per the new rules, grievances must be registered within 24 hours and disposed of within 15 days. So very clear time frame has been set for anyone to raise objections and for the platform owner to redress those grievances. The IT minister also said that the social media platforms will be required to appoint a chief compliance officer in India. So this kind of a post will have to be there mandatorily for all OTT platforms, all international platforms, whether it is social media or OTT for that matter. So these are the inputs that are coming in, and also more specifics with regards to OTT. The government said that self-regulation has failed for OTT platforms. First, let's listen into Ravi Shankar Prasad's statement on this.
It is very important that the social media users running into crores should also be given a proper forum for resolution of their grievances within a time-bound manner against the abuse and misuse of social media. पहला है कि आपको एक grievance redressal mechanism रखना पड़ेगा, and इस grievance officer का नाम भी आपको रखना पड़ेगा, who shall register the grievance within 24 hours and disposal in 15 days.
हमने OTT प्लेटफॉर्म्स के साथ दिल्ली, चेन्नई और मुंबई में उन उद्योगों के सभी लोगों को बुला के विस्तृत चर्चा की। मैंने खुद दिल्ली में 2 मीटिंगें बुलाई और पहले मीटिंग में मैंने OTT प्लेटफॉर्म को कहा कि आप सेल्फ रेगुलेशन बनाओ जैसा टीवी वालों ने बनाया है, लेकिन नहीं हुआ दुर्भाग्य से। फिर मैंने एक बार फिर मीटिंग बुलाई और कहा कि 100 दिन में बनाओ, लेकिन वो भी नहीं बना। बट लेट मी ऑल्सो टेल यू दैट एवरी फ्रीडम हैज टू बी रिस्पॉन्सिबल फ्रीडम।
Let's go across to Ayushman Kumar tracking the details for us. So Ayushman, for sake of our viewers, if you can take us through the primary points, the main highlights of the announcements made today, because these are regulations that will govern OTT as well as social media. It affects a lot of people in this country. Over to you for the important points and the big takeaways, Ayushman.
Well, Afrida, first of all, it is important to understand that there is 2 categories of social media which the government has addressed. One is the intermediary, which is the small ones, and the significant social media intermediary, which are the larger ones like Facebook, Twitter and other. The government has clearly said that these guidelines were being contemplated, and within a span of 3 months, they will be notified. They have said that there will be a chief compliance officer, which has to be resident of India, nodal contact person for 24/7 contact coordination with law enforcement agencies. Now, the government has clearly said that a resident grievance officer has to be there. The social media giants need to publish a monthly compliance report. And one demand which was always there on social media was of the voluntary user verification model that government has stressed upon, and has said that this should also be introduced, where one person can be given a voluntary method of verification. The government has clearly said that the users must be given an opportunity to be heard. If they are complaining, there must be a mechanism in which the people who have some grievances must be heard. Origination of fake news must be addressed by the social media as to who was that person, how, from where the first message originated. This was something which the government was concerned about. Fake news, nudity, and also the woman's modesty, which is being shown on social media. That is something which the government has taken note of and has clearly said that there is a compliance. Quoting the article 19(1), they said that there is a freedom of expression, but also responsibility comes with it. And government has clearly said that in India, the social media giants are welcome to do business, but there will be some restrictions. Fake news cannot be allowed. The double standards which we heard in Parliament also, Ravi Shankar Prasad saying, he has clearly said that there are certain compliances. These guidelines will be in force in about, they will be notified in 3 months, we are being told. For OTT platforms, clearly no censor board for now. The age bracket category has been made 13, 16 and above. The parental lock system is something that should be initiated. The government has said that they have held meetings with the concerned authorities of the OTT platforms. So far, not making a censor board. This was being contemplated whether a censor board will come for OTT as well. That has not been done, but definitely on social media, new guidelines will be there in force. Government has clearly said that fake news cannot be used to spread on social media, and also regulation of OTT will also be taking place in the country.
Right. So, Ayushman, from what you just mentioned, these three areas primarily, whether it's nudity, a modesty of a woman, or pornographic content, whether it's violent content, or fake news and misinformation and any kind of content that could disturb public order, all this will be now scrutinized. But I want to also understand what is the level and extent of government intervention in terms of what is the kind of penalty or culpability, for instance, that can also be now pinned down on the offenders. We'll come to that point. Let's in fact also talk about the guidelines that we have heard about in terms of the new guidelines for social media, as well as the new guidelines for OTT platforms. So Avni Raja is joining me now to take us through the guidelines broadly in terms for an easy understanding of our viewers. Avni, over to you.
Well, that's right. Let me just break it down point by point and tell you what exactly the guidelines are. Now, first off, a lot of importance has been given to the grievance redressal mechanism for social media. So a robust grievance redressal system for users is to be set up. Grievances are to be addressed within 24 hours or registered within 24 hours and then disposed of after being resolved within 15 days. So proper timelines for that. There's going to be an appointment of a chief compliance officer, which is going to be mandatory, and this person has to be a resident of India. The other very important guideline that has come in is that social media platforms will need to disclose the identity of the originator of mischievous posts as and when it is needed. So the first creator of a particular post that is in question, that might have to be disclosed by social media platforms as it is needed or deemed fit by the agencies. In fact, a provision for a voluntary verification mechanism should also be put in place, is what the rules say. Any unlawful information would have to be removed. That is the other important guideline as well. And this is also important from users' perspective, because if your account is either removed or disabled for any reason or blocked, you will have a chance to explain yourself. So the platforms will have to hear out the user when they are taking this decision to either block or deactivate a person's social media account. So these are some of the key highlights at this point in time for these guidelines. Afrida.
Okay. Right. I'm going back to Ayushman on that question I was asking on whether there can be penalties, what exactly was laid out, or whether there will be any special sections under which a person can be charged for non-compliance to any of these rules that were announced today.
Well, Afrida, most of it is on the part of the social media, but currently the government has clearly said that the action will be taken as per the IT Act. Now, if you go through the IT Act, clearly the provision for fake news and also for the other provision, it has been made that up to 5 years of jail can be given. But for now, the government has clearly said that most of the modules which have been drafted, the ball lies in the court of the social media companies as to how they have to act. But if the penalization has to be taking place,
Okay.
as per the IT Act, it will be taking place.
All right. Ayushman, thanks so much for joining us and giving us the important updates on the new guidelines announced for social media intermediaries and for the OTT platforms. These were areas which were hitherto ungoverned. There were no such government regulations for these two areas. Of course, there is a censor board for movies and there is also a program code for television programs that is in place. But when it comes to the OTT and social media or digital news platforms, there weren't laid down any kind of clear regulations, which has now been announced today. In news that we are breaking to you, Centre has once again opposed petitions on validation of same-sex marriage in Delhi High Court. Centre has asserted that Indian family recognizes a union only between a biological man and a biological woman. The Centre has sought dismissal of the pleas and the matter is now adjourned to the 20th of April. Meenakshi Banja joining us with more. Meenakshi?
For our viewers at this point in time, remember we at Mirror Now had broken the government's position first time in September 2020. However, this is the first time a written document which is articulating the position of the government has been accessed by Mirror Now. This has been submitted as a counter affidavit in the ongoing matter at the Delhi High Court, where the government of India is asserting before the High Court as to how the Indian family system and the lawmakers' intention recognizes only a union between a biological man and a biological woman. Government of India also goes on to state as to how decriminalizing same-sex relationship, consensual same-sex relationship was one thing. However, granting marriage rights is a complete no-no. Furthermore, the government is also stating in this counter affidavit as to how same-sex marriage is against societal morality, which is based on Indian ethos. Government is furthermore reiterating as to how the Western decisions are without any basis in Indian constitutional law jurisprudence, and therefore the courts should disregard what is happening in the West, but it should be more focused on the family system and what the government is terming as Indian ethos in the context of the government declining to put its might behind granting same-sex couples marriage rights here in India.
Yes, Meenakshi, for sake of our viewers, if you can also give us clarity that prior to this, same-sex relationships were decriminalized. So obviously there was a lot of hope within the LGBTQ community that the next step would be to legalize same-sex marriage. However, that is not what has happened. If you can throw some light on how this has been a long and arduous battle for the LGBTQ community.
Well, that is right. This is something which is a path fraught with obstacles. The LGBT community in India is very well aware of how this is going to be a long-winded, perhaps, litigation and a battle for civil rights as far as India goes. Government clearly telling the Delhi High Court that decriminalizing was one matter. Decriminalizing of same-sex consensual love essentially meant that it came within the realm of the privacy judgment which was delivered by a superior strength bench composition of the Supreme Court on an earlier occasion, which made the earlier Supreme Court judgment on decriminalizing of Section 377 as far as same-sex relations go as untenable. And therefore, the Supreme Court had gone ahead and decriminalized consensual same-sex relations in India. The government of India, that point in time before the Supreme Court, had left it to the wisdom of the Supreme Court to proceed as it deemed appropriate. Government had neither opposed it nor had it favored it. Government of India, for decriminalizing of same-sex relations, had told the Supreme Court that it is leaving it to the wisdom of the Supreme Court. However, taking it a step forward, like you rightly mentioned, would be then granting civil rights to the LGBTQ community in India. And that matter, as we speak, is pending in the Delhi High Court. Of course, it's now been adjourned for a further hearing in April. But today, the counter affidavit is the first official written articulated position of the government of India, which is clearly stating that decriminalizing was one thing. However, granting marriage rights is a big no, because it is against cultural ethos. It is against a plethora of laws that have already been framed keeping the family structure in mind, and it is against the societal morality of this country at large.
Right, Meenakshi, thank you so much for joining us and giving us clarity on this particular decision. Okay, so we are going to in fact go back to talking about the new guidelines announced for social media and OTT platforms, just to bring our
guidelines to regulate social media and OTT platforms, emphasizing a need for the robust grievance redressal system. The government said that the social media platforms will have to set up a compliant officer in the country, and has also added that OTT platforms will be regulated as well. I want to bring in my guests joining us this afternoon, Anila Singh of the BJP. We will also have a cybersecurity expert joining us as well in due course. But coming to you first, Anila Singh, I want to understand from you that we heard the minister saying that already you had cinema regulated with the cyber board, I beg your pardon, with the censor board, and you also have, of course, the TV content regulated by the government. But when it comes to social media and news websites, this was largely unregulated. But isn't it also true that when it comes to the OTT and the digital news platforms, these are viewed on individual gadgets? It's that personal space. It's not usually viewed as a family or in the open in a house. More or less, these are platforms which are used in personal gadgets. Do you think it was necessary for the government to enter this space, and if so, why?
Still, they can do so. Government is not stopping that. OTT platforms, they have to self-classify the content into 5 age-based categories. So this is what government has asked them, and there is absolutely nothing wrong in it. Government has not asked them to show or not to show any content. They have simply asked that you have to categorize your content in 5 categories. I think that is absolutely perfect. There is nothing wrong in it.
Okay. Even as you say that, there are quite a few concerns, and I'm just expressing concerns that the regular citizens would have around this. Of course, we do understand that, from the side of the government, keeping in mind the recent events, there is the issue of fake news, there is the issue of child pornography, of pedophilia. All of that being addressed is a healthy move. But I just want to know from you that will it throttle or will it restrict creativity? Will it restrict, those filmmakers, those people who found it refreshing to actually create content for OTT? Will they now have to operate under fear of the rule of the law?
Absolutely not. Government has not given any sort of indication about the content, that what you have to show and what you do not have to show. Government has simply requested that you have to categorize your content in 5 categories. This is the simple thing which government has instructed. So government is not stopping any sort of creativity. So those who want to make a hullabulla out of it or any sort of ruckus out of it, I think they are not going to get any issue.
Okay. All right. Karnika Seth, cyber lawyer and expert also with us. Karnika Seth, do you agree with it that this is not going to hinder creativity and imagination? This is only to create a very fair system where, people should not take liberties. In fact, the minister spoke about responsible freedom. But then the issue is who gets to define it and where does, this end? If at all we have a regulation of this nature, and who gets to decide which content is volatile and what is inflammatory, because then again there would be an issue of whether the government is trying to muzzle dissent. Now, in terms of strictly in terms of cyber law, what can be done? Can this be made, can this be brought under the IT Act, the new regulations that we are talking about? Can a person face punishment for non-compliance?
Under the current regime, IT Act is applicable in India, and through this rules, the government also, intends to expand the definition of intermediaries to bring into account the OTTs and online news providers and social media, giants, because a lot of information which is being circulated at, kind of broadcasted today happens to be violent, happens to be, something which is outraging the religious sentiments of people, or bringing public, disharmony, or any kind of, against the notions of public morality or decency. And that was the concern why these rules have been brought into being. But then, the issue is, to a lot of extent, it helps in enforcing the law, because having a grievance officer, even though there was a law of this nature, even now this was hardly being implemented. So having a chief compliance officer, having a grievance officer will definitely assist in that direction. uh, However, the point of subjectivity and objectivity of defining what is illegal and what is legal is definitely an important question. And for that reason, these rules basically give a three-tier structure. How this will be, decided. At the first point of time, there will be it's like a grievance officer who will be looking into the complaints, and then on the second tier, it would be retired judge who would be deciding on the on Supreme Court. So that will be a second tier, and then third tier is also
Okay.
being interministerial committee. So it really depends on how the reasonable creativity can be looked at from the reasonable person's standpoint, rather than any other subjective standpoint. So if it is per se illegal, it will have to be decided. So
Yes.
that's how it is. But then industry bodies definitely also have a say and
Yes.
role in this. And if they have a grievance with any of these rules, certainly that is open to challenge. Right?
Right. Anila Singh, I want a little bit more clarity, and I want to probe you a little further on what we last discussed about whether this is going to restrict creativity. Because, there's a reason why I'm asking this, that, for instance, as somebody who watches a lot of OTT platforms, I want to know from you that when you give this kind of a time frame that, okay, if you have an objection, report it within 24 hours, redress it within 15 days, don't you think that will lead to a culture of playing safe? Who would want to get into all this trouble? Play safe, keep clean content, don't go into too much of, trying to create situations that might invite trouble. That was my worry, why I asked you whether this is going to affect creativity of those new filmmakers who want to come in the OTT platforms.
So, as responsible citizens and responsible citizenry, rather, who are netizens today, as viewers or as publishers or broadcasters of such content or producers of such content, we all have an obligation, or rather a duty, to take care, of what content we put out in the world. So that really is important, and maintaining those standards of ethics or morality or decency is not something which is going to be hampering creativity. Probably it will enhance it, because the same things which a person wants to say will be said in a more subtle way than what will generate profanity or obscenity or any kind of violence. But yes, it should not curtail unreasonably any freedom of producers. And I am also of the view that there has to be a
quick last word from Anila Singh as well on this, please. Anila ji.
Yes. I think your worry is not for the OTT platforms who are regular watcher of different, whether we talk about Netflix or Prime Videos or Z5 or any of those. I think it is not going to hinder any of these platforms. But yes, about the posts which are being posted on Twitter or on Facebook or other social media platforms. So the 24 hours timeline is basically for these social media platforms. So we do not have to worry that.
All right. The government, of course, will justify this, saying that they have to exercise their responsibility to ensure that there isn't any such content that will disturb public order. So the government, of course, will stand by this. But we'll continue to have this kind of a debate and discussion. It's an interesting issue to talk about with experts. Thanks so much, Anila Singh and Karnika Seth, for joining us today.